Welcome, fellow vegetarians. I gave this, something strange happened a while back after I wrote Kitchen Confidential. I woke up one day to find Harvard Business Review on the phone wanting to talk about my interesting theories on management principles, team building, crisis management. I thought this was fairly hilarious and inappropriate, to say the least. Apparently the business community, people who don't work in the restaurant business anyway, I guess they saw Kitchen Confidential as sort of like pornography, in the sense that you're watching people do things on film or reading about things that you'd kind of like to do but probably won't be doing yourself anytime soon. And it seemed to have some resonance with them. So what I thought I'd talk a little bit about today are what are those principles? I mean, is the restaurant kitchen a microcosm, an example, like a test lab or an alternate universe of management principles? Can you apply those rules to other businesses or not? And who really cares? I guess what I'm really talking about is, what is a chef? A chef is a cook who leads. And in my own, my long but not particularly distinguished career, there are a few things I believe to be true that I've learned, and I thought I'd share them with you. Now, for an employee manager, the restaurant business can be a best case scenario or a worst case scenario. I mean, in the best case, you are, of course, for the most part, unless you're working for a major hotel, free of the annoying, human resource departments, fair hiring practices, normal constraints, political correctness. It's potentially a free market wonderland. It's a meritocracy. You're no good, you're fired. You show up late too many times, you're out. You can't make the food consistently, you're gone. Clean out your locker. In the worst case scenario, of course, you are dealing with a labor pool which traditionally, well, let's face it, the restaurant business for centuries has been a refuge for a motley crew of international misfits, refugees, quasi or illegal emigres, transients, criminals, semi-literates, most of whom have poor social skills and unlovely personal habits. And, let's face it, if you're running a kitchen, chances are your staff does not look like those squeaky clean kids on, Top Chef. They look more like the Dirty Dozen or a Mexican prison gang. So, how does this apply to, my situation? I mean, if you're not in the restaurant business, I don't think anything I say really in this talk should apply to your business, because you'll probably spend the rest of your life in court. Certainly my Billy Joel Grateful Dead rule in my kitchen, in which if you are seen to visibly enjoy the works of Billy Joel or the Grateful Dead, you are immediately fired, would probably not do well in the banking sector. Casually referring to an employee to their face as a genitally challenged, lower than whale shit bivalve whose parents probably commingled with livestock is probably not advisable if you're running a law firm. But I found that there are two schools of chefs, two management schools. There's the Gordon Ramsay school, which I, for better or worse, pretty much came up in that school. And then there's the Joe Torre, Thomas Keller school. Now, unless you're Thomas Keller presumably, or some of the chefs in this room, you really don't need to yell at anybody. In the Per Se kitchen, I'm willing to bet that if you didn't satisfy the chef, he doesn't have to yell at you. You're lucky enough to be working at Per Se. If on the way out of the day's work, you nod at Chef Keller and say, "Good night, chef," and he doesn't even look up or say good night to you back, you probably want to go home and hang yourself in the shower. That's motivation enough. He doesn't need to bully or yell. Now, considering the dysfunctional group of people who've traditionally been attracted to the restaurant business, and let's be honest, there are a very high number of employees with less than good reading skills, who are uncomfortable with certainly the outside world, normal social interaction. It is no coincidence that again and again and again, wherever you go in the world, in whatever kitchens, you find similar personality types. And yet the business has managed to survive and even prosper sometimes to ever greater prestige. I mean, to the point that chefs are actually celebrities now, in an unthinkable scenario a few years back. In spite of a business with a huge failure rate, fierce competition, and an ever-changing capricious market, People still do it. People still show up and manage to produce a completely perishable, non-transferable product consistently again and again over time. And this using a labor force that requires of these same misfits that I'm talking about, a complex skill set that you're both, you're using all of your senses. You're doing something that's very delicate and precise. It requires a certain level of brutality, strength, the ability to take enormous pressure, and it requires the use of all your senses: taste, smell, touch, a visual sense. As well, if you're in any kind of management position, a sous chef or a chef de partie, you're essentially expected to be a mix of both artist and air traffic controller. And one wouldn't think that those two things necessarily go together. So how do you manage? Or more to the point, how do I think you should manage? How do you build a team? How do you keep a team? How do you deal with hundreds of crises a day? Chances are you can't. There are two kinds of people in this world. There are people who like the relentless futility, heat, pressure, the madness, the insanity of restaurant kitchens. And then there's everybody else, normal people for whom that isn't attractive. So first, if you are a chef, what do you look for in an employee? Personnel selection is everything. Okay, I like to say that I can teach you to cook in my restaurant. Okay, I'll teach you how to cut the damn onion. I'll teach you how to make my food. But I can teach cooking. I cannot teach character. Okay, that's what I'm looking for first. The ability to, be an adult, a grown-up, to show up on time with a good attitude, to endure. So, there are a couple of things I look for. First of all, I don't care who you are, okay? What's great about this business, the things I'm talking about, being a refugee, a misfit, all of those things, that's the best thing about our business, because it is the last meritocracy. I don't care whether you were convicted of arson, your sexual preference, your sex, your race, your nation of origin, your legal status, your unlovely personal habits. I don't care about any of those things. All I care about is what can you do. So in that sense, it is a wonderful place. It is a melting pot. It is a unique workspace, unlike any other, where you are essentially forced to work with people who in any other industry you might not ever be friends with, be intimate with, be close to, trust, and communicate with. Hence the large proportion of migrants, emigres, and even illegals in this business, which I'm going to talk about later. On the other hand, so you're looking for an adult, someone with character, or of course you're looking for someone fresh out of school, young, impressionable, some dumbass kid who you can mold and twist into your own little robo-chef. Blind obedience, let's be honest here. Employee must. What do I require of an employee when they show up to work? First, did you bring a pen? Okay? My old mentor, Bigfoot, used to put an ad in the paper and for waiters, and maybe 10, 20, 30 waiters would show up, and he'd hand out the applications. They'd all sit at the bar, and then the ones that asked for a pen, he'd say, you know what? Spare us all, you don't have to fill out. You can go home now. You're going to be a waiter, right? For instance. You're going to fill out an application. It is a reasonable expectation that you might require a writing implement. You've just separated out the chaff from the wheat right away. Did you bring a pen? Number two, arrival time, particularly in the kitchen. Can you be trusted to show me the respect and the people you work with on either side of you to just show up on damn time every day? That's what I'm looking for right away. Somebody who shows up reliably. I never have to look at the clock wondering if so-and-so is going to show up. You know what? I know something about them important already. Something really fundamental, that they have that respect for themselves, for the people they work with and the people they work for, to at least show up on time, to be able to figure out, hey, I might run into traffic, I better leave a little earlier. Arrival time is everything. You show up 2-3 times in a row late, you're out, you're fired. Can you take pressure? Let's face it, this job, making the same thing, 10 things at a time, again and again and again, consistently, where in a business where everything is likely to go wrong, probably will go wrong, and will probably go wrong all at the same time, that's pressure. Sometimes people in the restaurant business are not nice. Sometimes they're not fair. Can you take that? Hence the gentle art of hazing. Now, I'm not saying you should ever bully anyone out of sheer joy of, of being a cruel and sadistic bastard. But there is, in fact, a sort of natural progression here. I mean, if you're working in kitchens, new guy shows up, you'll notice nobody calls them by their name, everybody's kind of pushing them. Why? And I'm sure many of the chefs here have seen this again and again, as I have. Some perfectly reasonable, well-paid adult, maybe they worked in a Wall Street sector, they decided, they saw Rachel Ray on TV, they decided, I want to be a chef. So they use all their savings, they go to a high-priced cooking school, then they show up with their little knife roll-up and the coffee filter on their head in my kitchen, and they want to do their apprenticeship, and they're all psyched, and they've blown all that money, and they've taken all that time off, and they're working like dogs, and then a week and a half later, it's Saturday night, and I look across the line into their eyes, and I see the dream die. They realize, this business is hard. I thought it was going to be glamorous. I've been peeling shallots for a week and a half. People are saying mean shit about me behind my back. I don't like this. This isn't fun. You would rather find that out not only as a chef, but as a cook, someone who has to work next to these people. I'd like to find out now. There are no secrets in the chef business. There are no secret recipes. This is a mentoring business, okay? Chefs, one at a time, teach someone they invest their time in or they see as worthwhile. We teach them everything we know and everything we have learned about everything over a 20, 25, 30-year career, all those things that we have learned, often quite painfully and at great personal expense. So I would rather know now, before I take time, or before my saucier takes the time that they don't have to step away from their station or away from their mise en place or away from their task to reproduce, to teach somebody again and again through repetition, because that's the way we all learn, repetition, repetition, repetition. I would like to know now, or as soon as possible, if you're going to start crying and freaking out, or you're suddenly going to shave your head into a mohawk and climb a tower, on the first busy Saturday night. I want to know as soon as possible. So if I have to push you a little bit, and if the other people in the kitchen are pushing you a little bit, let's be realistic. Like I said, we're just separating you out from the herd. Again, a natural process. Are you realistic? Are you an adult? We talked about before. Can you take responsibility? Can you work well with others? Okay, let's face it. In the kitchen, we are working with knives, many knives, sharp objects, many blunt objects, and boiling liquids and flames. My cooks need to get along together. Okay, I can't have feuds in the kitchen. I can't have a simmering, resentment that's just waiting for, one overcooked order of flounder to, set off apocalypse now. Can't have it. Can you get along with others at least during the work, during the service period? You want to shank each other after work on the subway? Be my guest. Finally, do you have a sense of humor? Because if you don't have a sense of humor in this business, you may as well get out now too, or work for Charlie Trotter. You have to be used to and inured to the fact that you are working in a business where the very day that the boss tells you, I'm sorry, we're going to have to lay off some of the minimum wage prep cooks and one of the dishwashers you desperately need, we're really going through some tough times. And at the same time, their Russian prostitute girlfriend drives up in a new Jag they just bought them. Hey, that's the restaurant business. If you're the sort of person who's going to go home freaked out at how unfair, how horribly, horribly unfair and grotesque that dichotomy is, you are not going to last in the restaurant business. Because it is another argument for people from other countries. It is why people like me, when they're looking down that line and thinking, well, gee, am I going to take some sensitive young soul out of cooking school, grew up with a silver spoon in their mouth, outraged by unfairness, injustice, and inequality, and are going to go home grinding their teeth and railing at God, every time they see that, or am I going to, spend my time? Wait a minute, my dishwasher's been with me a long time. He comes from a culture where he knows life is unfair. He calls the cops, they rob him. You know, he comes from a culture where food is already important, where he's already, chances are, responsible for other people. Maybe family members back in Mexico, family members here, comes from a culture that revolves largely around food, who's used to looking after others, and who is also used to the fact that of la puta vida, of this bitch of a life. It comes from a culture where they write songs about it, who can find beauty and irony and something to even, something beautiful in this often tragic and almost always unfair world. Hugely, hugely important. Now, what do you want to do, to create this kind of environment as a chef, as a leader? Camaraderie is everything, everything. The work is often brutal, degrading, underpaid, underappreciated, and you are working in an uncomfortable, hot, smelly workspace. It helps if you feel, at the end of the night, like an elite. You may go home stinking like smoked salmon and garlic, but you feel like you were the toughest ass motherfucker on the subway. You feel like you deserve that seat. You worked harder than anybody, you're stronger, you're faster, you know how to do something that other people can't do. And by any means necessary to build that kind of camaraderie within your crew is a very, very desirable thing. Without camaraderie, you don't have pride. Without pride, you have bad food. Nothing worse in this world than seeing an employee or a cook lose their pride. The days when, it is no coincidence that we're actually eating better. As annoying as this celebrity chef phenomena is, as excruciating as I might find the naked chef, you got to admit, we're eating better now. Why? Because people would never think of spitting in the soup anymore. It's been 25 years since I've seen anyone spit in soup. Why? Because there's actually, for the first time, a real chance of advancement, hope, prestige, and money attached to this business. That helps. So make your team feel like an elite. The Marine Corps is not a bad analogy. Traditionally it's a sector of the military who've taken the most casualties, had the stupidest command, sent out on the worst missions, and yet they also have the highest esprit de corps, because they've learned to take pride in the very sense that they are again and again screwed and stand up to the job. So, I use that as a model both in management as well as the rich vocabulary of the Marine Corps is very useful in the kitchen. If you've ever seen Full Metal Jacket, you know what I mean. Reward merit and punish errors consistently and evenly. Hard work and loyalty should be rewarded. The fact that you can't make a hollandaise sauce or you break the beurre blanc every time you make it is something that can be forgiven in the middle, in the beginning. Showing up late, looking like you don't care, should be punished, and consistently. Doesn't matter with whom. Should you socialize with crew? Yes. Hold on a second. Yo, guys, can we keep it down a little? Thanks. Thank you. Should you socialize with crew? Yes, you should. After work, a really hard evening, on the job. Yeah, I see nothing wrong with, it's the old British naval model of, rum, buggery, and the lash. Rum when you're good, buggery, and the lash when you're bad. Meaning, after work, bringing your cooks out for a beer is a perfectly acceptable thing. Rewarding your crew with liquor, I see nothing wrong with that. They should, however, know that just because we had drinks last night and said, I love you, man, at 4 in the morning while playing air guitar, does not mean that I will not fire your ass today if you show up, late. I believe also in Marxist self-criticism sessions after work, meaning if something went wrong, it's about momentum. We can't have the chef whinging and considering, gee, I don't know, should I put the parsnip puree on this plate? Oh, we're out of parsnip puree, what do I do? Let's talk about it. You have to make a decision and work through it. It might well turn out that decision in the heat of the moment is a bad decision. It is not time to discuss it during the service period. Afterwards, when we're having a beer, we can all sit down and talk about, moving to the parsnip puree, that was a really lousy idea. Or your, putting the apricot gelée, just didn't work with the mackerel. Let's talk about that after work. What sucked about the saucier last night? Better sitting down having a beer than in the heat of the moment where it's about getting food out. Lead from the front, of course, and lead by example, what the cooks want to see. They want to see the chef show up earlier, suffer more, and leave later than they do, period, okay? Generally, it's very tough to maintain, to really run a kitchen if you are seen as having any outside interest at all. You're writing books, or you're making TV shows, or you even have a serious love affair that you're very happy about, or God forbid, a hobby. Your cooks really don't want to hear about that. They want to make sure that mom or dad, whoever's running the kitchen, are at least enduring the same or worse. If you expect your cooks, as I do, the grease trap overflows, hey, you're getting in there, all right? I will do it too. I will drain the fryer later, if I'm going to ask it of others. On the other hand, you can't do everything yourself. You have to be able to delegate. If you're one of these chefs who insists on, just doesn't trust anyone to do anything, insists on doing everything themselves, you will burn out, go insane, drive others crazy, and not make it. You need people you can trust, who you can delegate other responsibilities to. Be decisive. I mentioned this before. Don't be afraid of making wrong decisions on the fly. It happens. Much better to be decisive and work through the mistake than stand there and dither. Be prepared to admit being wrong. Really important. If you ream somebody out in the heat of the moment, and you go over the line, sometimes it's necessary. You smash a plate, you scream at a vegetable cook, you go over the line. Here's the bottom line for me. At the end of the night, there is no one, front of the house or back of the house, who I feel I should not be able to have a friendly beer with after work and laugh about the evening's activities. I may hate your guts for 3 minutes, and you may hate mine during the service period. That's okay. But if you go home at the end of the night feeling like a fool for working hard for me, for putting in all those hours, for giving me your loyalty, your hard work, the benefit of your experience, for putting up with whatever I might have put you through. If you go home feeling like a fool for that, then I have failed as a chef. And if you do go home feeling like a fool, then I will apologize to you, and I will do so on my knees if necessary, rather than let that happen. Ultimately, be fair. The kitchen must remain a meritocracy. You want happy workers, ultimately, whatever it takes. Some people, it's a balance. I have the luxury of not being a great chef. So given a choice between, am I going to make my cooks, peel the fava beans while they're still raw, or am I just going to buy them frozen in a bag? So I'll have, happier cooks and, happy cooks versus slightly happier customers. I'm going to usually come down on the side of my cooks. That's me. An us and them mentality in the kitchen is not always a bad thing. Now, we may say unkind things about our customers. Some people were horrified in Kitchen Confidential, the dismissive way I talked about people who order egg white omelets or vegetarians. And it is not unusual, let's face it, take this order out to the assholes on table 7. We don't really mean that, but it's kind of useful to remind people that there's us and those like us in the kitchen, and then there's everybody else. To me, that leads to esprit de corps and that sense of being an elite and apart and better. And let's face it, as chefs, we all know that we are. Establish unwavering standards, meaning whatever the standards are. In my case, it means my French fries, my frites better be goddamn good. In other chefs' cases, obviously they're quite high. If you teach people this is the way to make a stock, that should be the way you always make it. Realistic goals should go with that, meaning you're working in a tiny box-like kitchen. You've got 2 cooks, maybe 30 menu items is too much, and maybe making fresh lamb stock every day is not the way to go. And then, of course, be prepared to break all the previous rules I just talked about. There is always room for one exceptional person in your kitchen, be it a consigliere. I call them, there's a classic character in French culinary history called a débrouillard, capable of something called System D, standing for démerder, an extricator, to pull you out. And this This person is someone who will, with plausible deniability, do what you, as the chef, cannot be seen to do. Meaning your blender breaks in the middle of the shift. There's a restaurant next door where they're not too attentive about such things. You know, you need someone now and again who can get beer from the bar, regardless of front of the house policy. You need someone who can do those little things. They are an exception to the rule. However, in order for them to be accepted, and that creature, this Sergeant Bilko-like character, to be accepted within this structure I'm talking about, they can only be accepted by also betraying you a little bit as the leader. Meaning, if they're getting special treatment, you know, there are some things I've found anyway that it's, you know, useful to overlook. And like your employees, of course, you know, it is you as a leader and as a chef must have a sense of humor. If you don't find, you know, the worst part of your job funny, at least in retrospect, after a couple of beers, you don't belong in the restaurant business. And finally, let us all acknowledge and understand at all times who is actually working in our kitchens, okay? Who is at least somewhere between 17% and 68% of the workforce in this business that we all claim to love. You know, if you've been to the James Beard Awards, you know, as I have, and looked out, and, you know, I've never seen so many white people in one room as at the James Beard Awards. Let us remember that between 17 and I've heard as high as 70% of the workforce in our kitchens are largely Latinos from Mexico, El Salvador, and Central and South America. That's who is there day in and day out. That is who is the back, like it or not, that is the backbone of our business. In a business that we're talking about mentoring, the strongest person in the kitchen, when you come in as a young pup and are assigned to a station, and someone takes the time to show you where things are and how to do it, again and again in my life, that person has been from outside this country and of varying legal status. Whatever you may feel, I mean, this is my final comment on this. Whatever you may feel about immigration policy, what we should do about it in the future, border control, all the rest, all I ask and like to remind people is ultimately who is doing the cooking in this country now, who has been doing it for some time. And I think let us at least acknowledge that before, you know, we move the discussion or the argument, you know, any forward. And I think also it would be useful to be grateful, enormously grateful for that. On that note, I thought we'd take some questions. Thanks. You know, this may be a glamour profession, but, you know, if every Mexican cooking in New York decided to not show up to work tomorrow, we're all out of business.
See from the glamour.
Yes, we are doing questions now?
We are doing questions now for you. Everybody, again, if you're too shy or you don't want to, something tells me you're not going to be shy about asking Tony questions, but jump up, raise your hands. We have people in the audience who can help. Go for it, attack.
Yeah, just raise your hand and, yeah. So I see who I'm talking to. Yep.
We have the lovely lady there with a microphone.
Come on, there's going to be a pissed off Rachel Ray fan or a vegetarian in here somewhere. Yeah. Step up.
Hold on, as soon as I get my sync together, I'll ask you all sorts of rude things.
I was just curious, do you think it's possible to run a restaurant where, because I know there's usually a higher, the front of the house will make more money than the back of the house, pretty much universally.
Right.
Is it possible to pay even wages across the board, split tips 50-50, or would you get anybody to work there?
No. Waiters should be compensated for the fact that they have to deal with the general public. That is a misery none of us in the kitchen could bear. Let's face it. It's why we're in the kitchen in the first place.
Question.
The poor people can only hack 3, 4, 5 shifts a week anyway. Yeah, let them get paid for that. Let them get paid for what they do. End of the day, no, I don't think so. I don't really like the idea of tipping out kitchen either. You know, ours is an honorable and noble profession. I don't think we should rely directly on the caprices of customers. No, don't like it. Yeah.
Have you ever found yourself having to back off on your standards a little bit as far as
yes.
As far as employment? Okay, I'll tell you what, it's been a tough year for hiring, and we're getting some very average applicants. And oftentimes, as much as I'd like to say, right, fourth time, fifth time, you're late, you're out of here, I don't have anybody else to fall back on.
Right. Yeah, it happens. You lower your standards, but what does that mean? That means that you've got to step up now and put in the extra work to essentially try and change somebody's life. You know, you got to take somebody and change their character a little bit, or do the best you can, at least long enough, you know, till you can find somebody who knows how to do the job the way you like it. Sure, it happens. It happens all the time. Don't like to do it. I believe, you know, if you can't, choice A, promote from within. Choice B, steal somebody good from a chef friend. You know, it's nothing personal about that. It's business. You know, a known quantity. And then C, you know, you take the applicant who comes in the door all, you know, all hopeful and delusional. Any other questions? Right here, sir.
Japoneses, americanos, de todo.
Well, thank you. Thank you. Well, I guess I just want to say, let's face it. We know who we are in this business, and we certainly know how we talk after work. So there's always been a dichotomy between, you know, the public perception of chefs. I mean, they may teach media training in culinary school now, and that's probably a good idea. That's the world we live in, where we need to present ourselves to the general public as, well, different than we really are. But we know who we are. And to me, the real joy of being in this business, one of the many real joys, is sitting around with a bunch of other chefs after work and you know, being ourselves. So you know, that just comes naturally. It's a part of the business. You know, I fell in love with the restaurant business, honestly, and the people the system and the people who work in it, long before I really fell in love with food. That kind of snuck up on me. I fell in love with this business for the lifestyle. And I guess maybe that's just me, but I doubt it. Everywhere you go in this world, you know, I seem to end up getting drunk at 3 o'clock in the morning with chefs. And it doesn't matter what country or culture, it seems there's this amazing consistency. If you go back and read Orwell, who took place in Paris in the 20s or further back, you know, this could have happened yesterday. Thank you, though. Any other questions? Over here? Oh. What do I think culinary colleges can do better?
To give their kids, you know, reasonable expectations when they come out.
Well, I think they should demand that, listen, before you spend money on culinary school, you should spend at least a month in a very busy restaurant working as a dishwasher or as a prep cook, whether for free or for money. Just by the end of that time, you're going to know, do I like this business? Is it for me? Can I survive in it before you waste the money? What can they do? I think schools are getting better at it. I know that CIA, I can tell you, I've been up a few times, are getting much better about telling you what the real world's going to be like and the requirements for externships. So I think just telling people up front, this is a hard, unglamorous business. I think that has to go hand in hand with the media training. That's something. You know, as much experience, as much exposure, encourage people to travel, and just scare the hell out of them early. Do you really want to be a chef? You know, this is what it's going to be like. You know, show them Gordon Ramsay's Boiling Point, first season. You know, it's like a highway safety film for chefs. That was when he wasn't playing himself. You know, that was when it was for real. That is an amazing show. Yeah. Louisa.
I know that you didn't travel very much before you got into this afterlife, but can you talk a little bit about the how-to for people to travel and develop their palate internationally?
Jesus, be grateful. You know, if you have the opportunity to travel, you know, you are lucky. You are fortunate. You know, if you're lucky enough to go to Thailand or Singapore or Spain, you know, don't go there sitting down and say, you know, I'd like a tuna sandwich or a club sandwich or a hamburger. You're there to experience as much as you can, free of fear and prejudice. Never say no to anything. Eat as much of whatever's around as you can. Drink all of the local beverage that's offered to you. Get drunk with strangers and be grateful for the fact that you were lucky enough to do it, and show that appreciation. Food is the best, purest example and expression of an entire culture, a cultural and regional identity. So to turn your nose up, the notion of like Woody Harrelson did reportedly, sitting in Thailand and eating the same raw food salad every single day in his 6,000-year-old incredibly varied food culture, that really offends me. I guess my answer would be a grateful and polite guest. I think that's the best you could hope for. Don't, just because it looks squiggly and frightening doesn't mean it's not good or that you can't learn to love it. Chances are the country you're eating in has been cooking a hell of a lot longer than ours. Good to see you, Louisa. Yep.
How you doing?
Good.
I listened to you speak in South Beach Food and Wine Festival, and you were speaking of the virtues and the nobleness of dealing with, as a chef, dealing with tough cuts that no one wants to deal with. You spoke of, show me, here's a beef chuck.
Right.
Make this tender. Here's a lamb shank. And it almost seemed like you were talking that the culinary world is going into some kind of retro phase where we're dealing with these tougher cuts of meat. I have a colleague here in New York who works at a restaurant that's dealing with a lot of chemical compositions and a lot of stuff that we're seeing out of some in Spain. And he talks about these things that they just like blow up with these chemicals and they float away and stuff like that. I just want to know if you think that the culinary world is going into that direction, as he's very adamant about telling me, or are we going back to our roots where, food's not going to change, it was previously alive, and we just have to cook it better?
Listen, I think there are two major schools right now of cooking. There are a lot of, I believe, there's the Fergus Henderson school, and by the way, we'll be talking with Fergus and Chris Cosentino on the subject of exactly that, tough cuts and organ meats, shortly. I mean, you really can't find any better or more influential sources to talk about that with, and that's coming up shortly. And then there are a lot of people, the modernists, I don't know what Ferran and what Grant's doing in Chicago and others. Listen, they're two very different styles, but they eat each other's food and like it. At the end of the day, we're all cooks. What you choose to cook and what you love, you express in very different ways. I think there's certainly a shared appreciation in both of those schools of shanks and bellies and organ meat, because all of us who love to eat and to cook, we believe that stuff to be the good stuff. Any Cretan can be taught to grill a filet mignon. That's mindless repetition. It takes some craft and artistry to coax flavor and texture out of a tough cut, and that's, in fact, real cooking, because that's what people, because they're hungry, have been doing for hundreds, if not thousands of years. That's how we all learn to cook. How do I keep it without a refrigerator? How do I make it edible? How do I feed my family of 6 out of something intended for 2? All of the basic culinary techniques, more classic French and Italian techniques, are rooted in exactly those kind of problems and in exactly those kinds of meats. And I think because we can now, because guys like Mario Batali can actually decide what you're going to eat next year, because he's that influential, we are seeing a lot of chefs flexing and saying, you know what, next year, God damn it, it's going to be rabbit kidneys. And they have the juice to pull it off. I don't see a dichotomy between the two. They're two very different types of dining experiences for sure, but I don't see them as opposed to each other, and I think that, variety is a good thing. Hope that answers your question.
I would add, in the same way that you, the Vogue telephone book, is out this month. How many of you go to a runway show and buy, Alexander McQueen dresses? But it does filter down eventually. 10 years ago, you couldn't buy soy sauce in supermarkets. You can buy flank steak at the Stop and Shop. All of this stuff does trickle down, and as Antoinette said in her opening speech, all of you have actually reported that the basic foodstuffs remain the same, but you're still influenced by. So I'm with you on that one.
Anything that increases options as a diner and as a chef, and increases the possibilities of ways that you're able to express yourself or experience food is absolutely for the good. These are good times to be eating, and definitely good times to be cooking.
Who would have ever thought we live in a country where people eat calamari?
I remember when calamari was thrown out, and I remember when tuna was sold directly for cat food. No one would think of eating it. To me, if there was one tipping point in American gastronomy over my career, it was when suddenly, and for whatever reason, probably for the wrong reasons, sushi became popular. Americans overcame a lifelong revulsion, an aversion to raw fish. Suddenly they wanted it. Now, did they go to the first sushi bar and decided they like it because their friends thought it was cool? Because some knucklehead on TV said, I eat it? Because it was pretty? Who cares? The fact is, suddenly people were eating at sushi bars, and that lifted all boats for everybody. Suddenly, French and Italian chefs, the quality of fish that we saw on the market shot through the roof. Our expectation of quality went up. The variety of fishes that we could serve in our restaurants increased because, you know, things like eating mackerel, once unthinkable, suddenly became potentially desirable. So, you know, anything that adds something new to the picture is a positive thing.
Beef cheeks. Who would have thought?
Beef cheeks, you know, it's about time. I mean, or, you know, it was 5 years ago, you know.
The sushi thing is definitely incredible. The kids won't eat liver, but they'll eat raw fish.
Well, the next big thing, and I'm telling you, my chicken sashimi. Oh, yes. There's a late night, there's a lot of late night yakitori joints springing up, and I'm getting into the you know, the breastbone, skin, cartilage kebabs and the chicken sashimi. And, you know, you go there at this one place, and it's like 11 o'clock at night, and it's half Japanese and half, like, you know, American chefs all sitting around really getting into that. So maybe that's the next big thing.
Maybe that raw chicken, we can't wait. See you in the hospital in the morning.
Yeah, I guess we should stick to healthier, safer stuff like spinach.
Yes, exactly. Any other questions for Tony while we have him?
Excuse me. How do you reconcile the variety and the quality of the food that we have now with the highest number of obese people in the world?
Mm-hmm. I think that you know, the real if you go to Houston Airport, you can walk around. You can walk for 2 hours and not see a single person with a neck. Hey, it's okay to get big, but you know, at least get big on stuff that gives you pleasure. I think a lot of people, this is a lifestyle thing, it's not about food at all. I think it's possible, certainly if Europe and the French have shown us anything, it's possible to, you know, eat huge amounts of incredibly rich food all day long, or seemingly. You know, they don't snack in these other cultures. They're just sitting around eating Cheetos, joylessly chawing at crap food. I mean, all this stuff that's so super fattening is not even good. That's a tragedy. You know, get big on good pasta, fine. You know, getting big on, you know, ho-hos and McNuggets, that's something grim. And I'm convinced that people who are eating that stuff and drinking, you know, if you're drinking, you know, 6 liters of Diet Coke a day, you know, you're not thirsty, you're fucked up. And I also believe, let's bring ridicule back to the school. Okay? Now, McDonald's has sensibly targeted children. They put up signage in return for giving money to school districts, as I understand it. They very sensibly made Ronald McDonald, I think, the most recognizable figure in the world. You know, wouldn't it be great if, you know, kids started bullying other kids at age 3 and 5? Oh, you still eat at McDonald's, you know, you smell, you've probably got cooties too, you know, you're an idiot. You know, using cruel, children can be so cruel. Let's turn that to, you know, force to good. You know, make Ronald evil in the minds of small children. You know, start calling, you know, crack for kids. And, you know, maybe that will have some help. But because I think it's a lifestyle choice, it has to do with snacking, not moving, and filling some empty space in your soul that has nothing to do with hunger. I mean, oh, also, and people just aren't smoking enough.
Yeah. They get insulted. They definitely get insulted. Remember that McDonald's remains the world's largest restaurant corporation, so they're in no rush to make their...
The evil empire. I believe it's been our most dangerous export. We could have saved a lot of money on the CIA and nuclear power if we just opened up McDonald's franchises in the, in our target country.
It is. We're exporting it to India and China at the moment.
We'd be able to smoke them out of their holes if they couldn't get their asses in the first place.
There you have it. We will have more of Tony. We have Guts and Glory, his discussion on offal, which I'm excited about, with Chris Cosentino and Fergus Henderson, my favorite restaurant in London, perhaps the world.
And my favorite restaurant in the world?
St. John. Tony and I are in agreement on that one, where I live when I'm there. So we'll have plenty more time with Anthony. And in the meanwhile, we are getting ready to have Albert Adria, who's going to have Jose Andres. You gotta get that down. Who's going to translate for him, and they will show you the most exciting techniques for making pastry that are ever possibly could be invented. So we have that coming up in just a few minutes. Tony is not going anywhere, so you can keep asking him questions. The other thing that I'm supposed to mention on pain of death is Josh DeShellis and a whole bunch of other chefs have posted a board in the Nespresso Lounge, which is back there in the product division, with recommendations. They want all of your recommendations. Tony, of course, has indicated that we're all foodies. And so over the next few days, if you go to any off the beaten path restaurants in New York, check in while you're in town, just put it into this board. So that I guess every day they're going to check this board and see where you've all been eating and being sorted or staying out until late night establishments, and we want to know where all that is. Do keep that in mind. Also, Antoinette, being the clever lady that she is, wanted me to remind you all that Star Chefs is coming out with his first book. Do you know that?
I did not know that.
Neither did I. Starchefs.com, and there's a BLAD, that's industry lingo for, what does BLAD stand for? BLAD.
It's a few pages of the book.
It's the thing that they sell to get it into bookstores and stuff. So it's floating around the shop. So take a look at it. So if you'd like to order the book, you can. And without much further ado, I think we have Jose and Albert ready. Did you know in Albert's thing he talks about being thrown out of gym class? So you're right, it's about the lifestyle thing.
We have so much in common.
I know. If you can get thrown out of gym class,
See you guys later.